Hey everyone, welcome to a new pod. In this pod, we're going to be looking at how a bill becomes a law, which we kind of looked at last pod. But in this pod, we're going to look a little bit more into how that process happens and all the different things that can influence or affect that whole process. So remember, we're looking at how a bill becomes a law and all the different factors and things that go into that bill becoming a law, all the things that can affect whether or not that bill becomes a law. So our objectives, we're going to look at the importance of law. We're going to evaluate how a bill becomes a law. So by the end of the lesson, you're going to be able to describe how a bill becomes a law, at least like the basics of it. You don't need to know every single little step, but it's important that you know the basics behind how a bill becomes a law. So before we kind of look at that, just a little review, some things you need to know, two words that you need to be able to distinguish between. That means you need to be able to know the difference between them. Because we always say bill and we're always saying law, so what's the difference? A bill is what you call law before it's a law. A bill is just an idea, like a proposal, something that they have on the table, something that they're thinking about making into a law. That's all it is. It's just something that's on paper. It's an idea on paper, and they're thinking about making it into a law. So when does it become a law? It doesn't become a law until it goes through this whole process that we're going to talk about today. Some bills never become laws. Some bills do what they call or become killed. That's the word that they use in Congress. So bills are just the things that are ideas for laws. It's not a law until it becomes official, until certain things happen to make it officially law. Most bills never become laws. So another little review thing. Remember, all three branches have something to do with the law. But as far as how a bill becomes a law, the branch that has the most power, kind of the most say in all that, is the legislative branch in the middle here. Remember, when we're talking about the legislative branch, we're talking about Congress. So a lot of the things that we talk about in this lesson are going to be things that the legislative branch does, things that happen in Congress. So let's look at the process a little bit together and try and figure out the steps for how a bill becomes a law. So remember, when a bill starts out, it's literally just an idea. This picture shows the building that Congress meets in. It's called Capitol Hill. And you can see the bill is there, and right now he's just an idea. He's not a law. He's not something that people have to follow yet. The bill is just something that is an idea that somebody came up with. Where did the bill come from? Who thought up of the bill? The bill can come from a variety of people. It can come from the president. Remember, he can just suggest the idea, he or she. It can come from legislators, which means people that are in the legislative branch can come up with these ideas. It can come from lobbyists. These are people that try and influence the government about certain things. Like tobacco companies have lobbyists that try and get laws that they want passed about tobacco, as an example. Or they can come from you, your constituents. Constituents are people that the government represents. So we, the people, the constituents, the people that voted for these people that are in Congress, we can come up with ideas and suggest them as well. We can't literally go to Congress and stand there and say our ideas, but we can suggest them to the people that represent us. Now, this process is tough. It's not really easy for a bill to become a law. There's a variety of reasons for that, which you're going to see in the homework assignment. It's really tough for a bill to become a law. They set it up that way on purpose. They didn't want it to be too easy because then they felt like, well, then they just pass laws constantly, even if they weren't necessary. So when you go through this process, there's a lot of ways that the bill can be killed. There's a lot of ways that the bill can stop and never become a law. That was to make sure that there wasn't any bad laws. Are there bad laws sometimes? Sure. But the process makes it so it's tough to pass some of those bad laws. So go through the steps real quick. There's the first step is that the bill is introduced. There's two parts of Congress. There's the House and there's the Senate. And they each meet, if you look at the Capitol building, one meets on one side of the Capitol building and one meets on the other side. So a bill can be introduced or brought up in either house. So after it's written up, they don't just vote on it right then and there. It goes to a committee. The committee is like a small group of people who know a lot about the topic that the bill has to deal with. So that committee will sit there and talk about it, maybe rewrite it a little bit, and decide if it's a good bill or not. So that's the first chance that a bill has to be killed. At that point, if the committee decides it's no good, they're going to send it back to the person that suggested it, or they're just going to get rid of it altogether. So that's the first chance that the bill can just stop. If the committee approves it, then it's going to move to the next step. These are just some examples of committees. So there's a committee, for example, that deals with labor, which means like working conditions. So if there's a bill about making it so people get more vacation time, for example, that has to do with labor, which means another word for working. And the committee that deals with labor would look at that bill and decide on it. So let's say it actually gets past the committee. It gets on to step 3. The next thing that's going to happen is people are going to be able to debate it. So in each house, in the House of Representatives and the Senate, both houses would have the opportunity to talk about the bill and argue it. So some people would say why it was a good bill. Some people would say why it was a bad bill. And they might change it around again. They'll be able to say their piece on it and say what they think about it. And if it gets to the point of a vote, then it's voted on. Most of the bills never get this far. Most of the bills end up stopping before they even get voted on. So it's really tough to get past that part. Because if you're going to get to the part where it's going to be voted on, you probably had to have a lot of people that thought it was a good bill. So it's really tough to get past that part. Let's say it does get past that part, though. Then what happens? Then the members of the House get together and they try and make one bill. So everything they talked about, everything that they debated, they try and rewrite the bill one last time to make sure that it's perfect and it has all the ideas that people think make it a good bill. If it gets past that point, then each house votes on it. So they vote on it separately. So the House of Representatives votes on it, and the Senate votes on it as well. It's got to be approved by both houses. That means more than 50% of both houses have to agree that it's a good bill. A lot of them don't get past that step either. A lot of them end up stopping in one of the houses. Sometimes the House of Representatives will vote for the bill, but then the Senate won't, or vice versa. Sometimes the Senate will vote for the bill, but the House won't. So again, that's another opportunity for the bill to stop or be killed. But let's say it gets past that point. That's when it finally goes to the president. And the president can do a couple things. The president can sign it, or the president can veto it, or cancel it, or reject it. So if the president signs it, then it becomes a law. But what happens if the president rejects it, or if the president cancels it, or vetoes it? All those things mean the same thing. What happens then? It can actually go back to Congress. This is checks and balances, one of the things we learned about last pod. It can go back to Congress, and Congress can vote on it again. If 2/3 of Congress, means 67% of Congress, votes to override or go against the president, then the bill becomes a law. Even if the president rejected it, Congress has a way to override the president. So if the president signs it, or if Congress overrides or rejects the president's veto with enough people, it becomes a law. It's a long process. It's a really long process. Some bills, or most bills, don't make it past step 2 or 3. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is something that you're going to talk about in your prompt quiz at the end of the week. So be sure to join us for our live class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Questions, need help, just contact me. My information's there. I'd be happy to help. Keep in mind that during this pod, everything that we look at is going to have something to do with how a bill becomes a law. So each thing that we look at is going to be something that has some kind of impact on this process that you just learned about in this lesson. If you have any questions, like I said, reach out to me. If not, good luck.